All good?
$9.
Will it record?
It's like you just need to and it will hit.
Broke.
Yeah,
Okay. So the YouTube will have
that's a
that.
joke.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and call to order the meeting for the Oregon City Council Economic Development Committee. So we'll call the meeting to order at 4:03 p.m. Before we get started, I want to thank everybody for being here today. We know everybody's got busy schedules, and we're certainly glad to have everybody with us today. Get a little information, talk through it. Just to introduce the committee and kind of what we're going to do today, I'll kind of high level it for everybody as we go. So the members of the Economic Development Committee for Oregon City Council, I do chair that committee. Also, Councilman Tim Zale, Councilman Marvin Davish serve on the same committee. We also have Dennis Waldenczak, our president of City Council, that's here with us as well, and Kathy Polloff, one of our councilwomen as well. We've got several members of the administration here, including Mayor Mike Safarian, several members of the administration. We also have individuals from our Oregon Economic Development Foundation here with us today, as well as some of their board members. So we thank them for being with us today. Not with us yet, but will be joining us in a little bit is Gary Thompson from the Regional Growth Partnership. So they'll be there to join us and do a little piece a little bit later. As we get going through this, just so everybody knows, if you've not been to a committee meeting before, these are basically working meetings. So we're going to have some presentations, some information shared from a bunch of different people, some updates, some information, some discussion. The one thing just to make sure, public participation is not typically a part of these meetings, although you're certainly, they're open to the public. We will try to make some time available at the end if you have questions, kind of pertinent to what we're talking about today. So if any questions come up, we will try to make some time available at the end to ask those questions. Important notes to make to everybody. Nothing's being voted on tonight. Nothing's being considered tonight specifically. It's a working committee meeting. No action is being taken, no zoning is being reviewed, and there is no project that we're talking about specifically. This is an update. It's informational for members of the committee as well as other council members, and for an opportunity for the public to hear some of the discussion of what's going on. I do just remind everybody, thank you, Gary. I do remind everybody it is a professional working meeting. So we just ask that we provide courtesy and professionalism as we're in here with the chamber as well. With that, our leading item on here today, I'm going to kick it over to Mr. Beasley, our city administrator, who's going to give us a little bit of update on our town center development. Mr. Beasley.
Mr. President, members and folks in the audience, as folks know, Oregon has worked for a number of years to help prepare the way to bring some development to the core of the community, look for some of the amenities that people are looking for. We thought it'd be good to kind of give a little update to kind of roll through that and talk about timeline. Phase one that we're working on is our roadway. That's the first thing we're doing. We have gone out to bid. The bids have been awarded, and the price came in well. That was very competitive, and we have a good Mosier got the low bid on that, and we're excited about their partnership on it. They have a lot of experience with significant projects. We'll kind of show the map on it as we can roll to, if we can roll to the map on the site. You can look at, give folks context. Dustin is right in the middle. At the top of your screen would be Navarre. The kind of top left. On the left-hand side is the, as you look, would be the St. Charles Mercy campus. The kind of top that shows the white is the space that essentially was the Kmart parcel. We are looking south all the way to Pickle Road. And let's kind of roll through so the roadway construction will begin probably in August, maybe September, with a completion next June. For that is in their contract, end of June, Paul, on that. End of June, we feel good about that partnership. We have a roadway comes in off of Pickle, runs up, kind of a little zoom in, kind of runs up to a circle, then north, essentially through what is, and some of you now might view as the driveway for Dunn's property. And the way we have, we've been working through on this, we have a little land swap with Dunn's. We're going to take a little piece of their property for our circle, and we'll swap out some land with them and some roadway materials from some of the rubbleized materials to kind of work out a swap work. We're excited about that. I think Dunn's excited to be kind of in the center of something instead of kind of in the back. And if those of you who have been around a long time know, the intention was to have Dustin be more of a center to the community than it is, and it just never evolved that way. This kind of helps to make that happen. And let's talk about phase one is going to be the residential side to the south. And we have two components of that. Mark Rigg, who almost everyone knows in Oregon, has been a successful builder of homes here for many decades. I think he's probably Oregon's most best known builder. He's interested in taking the lead. We have 37 lots. And it's what's nice about Mark's approach to things. This is kind of typical of what he's building, maybe along Wind Road, if you've seen what Mark works on there. But Mark will build anything in this space that what the customer, he's going to build what the customer wants. It's important to know the city's not going to come in and say, we want everything to look like X. We want you to build things that the market doesn't want. We want you, he's going to work with each customer, and he thinks there will be strong demand. The strongest demand right now in the market is for a product like this. It's the sort of things he's building right now, but he will build 2 stories if people want 2 stories. He'll build basements if people want basements. It's a question of what they're looking for in the marketplace. And the strengths of what the kind of the amenities that they're looking for that really have Mark excited. The bike trail that comes in, the proximity to opportunity to maybe walk over to a coffee shop or a restaurant, proximity to the 2 hospitals, both north and south, and we'll kind of take through. The next phase of it, which will come in again when the roadway is completed enough to allow the construction. We have a strong residential apartment developer with a great regional experience. That's going to go with 2 models of buildings. One's kind of got a 2.5-story look, so it won't all be the same, and the other is a 3-story look. It's the Cash Wagner Group. This will be their 4th center in this market. They've built and completed a very successful project in Perrysburg. They have a very successful project that is just completing construction in Waterville. They have a very successful project that is just in the dirt moving stages in Sylvania, kind of behind the Kroger store, if you can picture that at Sylvania and King, to give you some proximity for where that is. And again, among the things that drives our interest from our retailers and people who have wanted more restaurant opportunities for our region and retail opportunities for our region, as they say, we want denser residential, something that Oregon doesn't have. That's been a challenge for us. And among the challenges, and the council has talked about this over a couple of years, is that the world now lives in different ways than we did a few years ago. People my age bought their first house at 21 or 22 or 23. There are so many of our younger residents that are buying their first house at 31 or 32 or 33. And as I said to my daughter who rents, who is now 30, she said plus 30, she said, why do I want to mow a lawn on weekends? I travel. And they live in a world where they're likely to get transferred, or their job is going to be in Austin or Boston or Houston. And they're getting married at a later stage than, I think Julie and I had 3 kids by the time we were 30. So if you look at that world, they're getting married later, they're doing a household startup at a later date, and they're looking for that kind of apartment opportunity. This is a strong group that first approached us because they're doing the apartments up in Dundee, Michigan. That's where they kind of were doing the first around the Cabela's there. And they're coming to this market and they want to have 4 units that surround it. They feel very good about the expressway access and all the interchanges, the proximity to the hospital, and working with the St. Charles team for their workforce. The St. Charles workforce needs places to live, and they're not all looking to buy. So we'll add that 2 different mixes within. So that's kind of important to the community as we go, that our partners are excited about. So among the other challenges for Oregon, not to demean the residential opportunities we have here, but unless a community welcomes new apartments, the community is only going to have the oldest apartment stock in the region. And that's among our challenges. We look at Oregon's apartment stock. It's among the oldest in the region. Got some quality spots, but it's aging. If we don't bring in new apartments, the other ones are the only thing in the market, and that's the only opportunity that's there. So we wanted the council to have that update in terms of the next phases. Are going to be on the retail side, and we can kind of maybe show come in on that. Oh, our apartment for our contract with the apartments is such that they would begin construction, and our requirement is we have to deliver a roadway to them by June of next year in terms of their timing. So we have to have that roadway done. They worked with us. We were able to get a lower bid on our roadway, Paul's team and Rodney, by extending that construction period because of workforce challenges, et cetera, in the market, so folks know. So we're excited about that piece of it. I may go back to one thing on the roadway to show the bike trail side. There's really 4 things that the retailers and restaurants and the residential are excited about what Oregon has to offer. It's the expressway exits that bracket our sites. They like being next to healthcare campuses. We have a St. Charles Hospital immediately adjacent to this. It's an important partner, important longtime investor and employer in our region. We have the Bay Park campus immediately south of this. And that workforce is looking for residential opportunity and a place to grab a bite to eat and a place as well. So the things we have going for are expressway access, the hospital healthcare campuses, the car count along Navarre is another piece of it. Restaurants and retailers want car count. We have about 40,000 cars a day through that intersection of Wheeling and Navarre, and that's attractive to our market. That's why the city and the foundation in partnership went through the effort to assemble land so we could deliver something. Without that land assembly, project just doesn't happen as we go. The other amenities that was exciting to them on the retail side is when I think the mayor and I were in a session with a person who builds the villa style homes that are the primary, is that he finds that his tenants, and he's built a lot of units, more than anyone else across this region. It wasn't Mark, it was a different developer. And he said they were making him make a connection to a bike trail, and he was complaining about it as one of their sites. And then he learned after he did it, after he complained about it, that it was his best-selling amenity. People want to be next to a bike trail. They want to come in and have their villa, their apartment, have that access. So our bike trail network, everyone knows we have worked through our first several phases. So we have a bike trail that connects from Maumee Bay State Park. It comes through South Shore Park. It comes through the Clay High School campus and that environment that connects to this campus and has a beautiful, attractive walkway along the creek back there. If you haven't walked your dog along, walk it. It's working. And it comes from Clay High School there.
It goes into Pearson Park, and that important Metro Park partnership and network connects along most of it, almost all of it off-road, but then it connects with both two on Star along our roadway with two of our a grade school and a junior high, which is important connection again for our residents there. But then we have our north-south connector, and we've finally wrapped up. Our friends at Walmart have just taken a while to do their property exchange to have that access. We're going to be able to come from Pickle Road north to Navarre. That's already completed with the track. Then Navarre up to Star to make that final connection. And then the last piece that's important for this connection, the city has retained in easement and right of way and ownership, depending on the shape of it, all along Dustin, all the way going over to the new Dairy Depot location. So you're gonna be able to go, and that connects to the where the bike trail comes in, our north-south connector. So you'll be able to go from our town center, from the new apartments to the new villas, to this complex, to Pearson Park, to Maumee Bay State Park. And it is the sort of amenity that the market is looking for. So our retailers are excited about that. And restaurants are excited about those opportunities. So something that takes a while to assemble those lands, takes a while to assemble those right-of-ways. The city's worked on them for a number of years and the council's worked through them. And we're excited about what that means as we go through it. So that bike connector, if you look at if you drive along Dustin through the town center, you'll see a very wide right-of-way. We will have a right-of-way we'll have a bike trail connector. We'll convert that sidewalk into a larger pedestrian path and corridor that will be shared for bikes and or roadways. It is going to be a really nice experience for those. Anybody can hop on a bike and walk over. You can go over to Dairy Depot. You can go over from that area, from our neighborhoods along that corridor over to our town center and grab a beverage. Among the things we're debating and looking at, and then we'll have to work through, is should at some point we allow, and where it's an open question, should we allow that little neighborhood, the town center area, to use that trail with golf carts, things like that? Does that make sense? Is it good news or bad news? I'm a cyclist. I have other friends that rather be on a golf cart. Those are important questions we're going to have to work through. A final amenity in that space that we're looking at, and maybe we can kind of zoom in. Almost every community around us now is engaging and looking at dog park opportunities. And the foundation is kind of leading effort of bringing together a committee to look at a dog park opportunity. We have met with the Y, and just south of Pickle, so it would be immediately south of our town center, we are looking at a space. I don't know if you have that map to queue up or not. I don't know if it's there. Essentially where where the recycling center now, where that parking lot is for the recycling center, it will be just south of that in that space. And we've met with the Y. We haven't, we've got a handshake deal to work together to develop something so that we could, sure it's there, but that's all right. But we have a site that we would use that parking lot that already exists. And we, talked to some, the people who run the other dog parks in the area, and that parking lot that already exists would be large enough. A lot of people will walk their dog over from neighborhoods like Hall's Child or neighborhoods, the new neighborhoods we're creating, and others would drive over there, but it would create a new opportunity. It would run along the 280 fence, if you can picture that, in that space. So for us, it's a kind of amenity that the developers were excited to see. It brings people together, creates a center, and kind of takes us to that next page. So the final phase of it is the part that really took a year and a half off with COVID, and is our retailers and restaurants are excited about coming to Oregon. We're in committee in front of several national chains right now who want to be here. In committee, their site selection committee that we have developers working through. All the restaurants kind of took a year and a half off with COVID, and they're working through their issues. We'll kind of show folks what we're looking at right now. And this is a rough design that has been worked through by one potential developer that's working with us, and they're floating it, and they shared this with us. We'd look to have a town green on the south end of this thing right along Dustin Road, with opportunity for maybe medical office and some retail around it, and maybe some retail with residential above it, or some townhouses. So looking at both of those options. On the north side, along Navarre, you would have Navarre-oriented retail, and we have We have restaurant chains that are interested in coming to that market right now. They again like those pieces, the car count, the new residential, the bike trail, the hospital next door. Those pieces of it are what they're looking for and are excited about. We would look to do a hotel long-term, we think could be part of this project. Hotels are taking a little time out right now, so everybody knows, in most locations, as business travel has slowed down a little bit and people are doing more Zoom meetings. But our developers say they have hotel operators, and we've had hotel operators come in and see us that said, don't let anyone build here without calling us and giving us a chance to propose. They know that long-term hotels like to be next to hospitals as they go, and they're interested in that space because of that demand. So those are the things that are going on. We're looking probably in the next 60 days to be able to roll out some specific announcements about the phased-in parts of the north, the retail and restaurant side. We have restaurateurs that really want to be here. Restaurants are slower to pull the trigger in this market. We're still having some restaurants closing down. A couple on Alexis Road and one in Sylvania we know closed. They're at a little slower pace, but people want to be in this space. So we're excited about that. We will continue. We had a significant developer who spent 4 days in town in the last week. He just called again right before we came in here, just to talk through how his trip went. And he has retailers. He's one of the most successful national developers of facilities like this, and he's excited about the opportunity to work in Oregon. So we'll continue to work through that. We wanted folks to know where they went. The dog park side, our committee will take a look at that, and we think it could be a nice space to go through. All right, so that's all. That's the update on the town center. Well, we want to roll back to Steve and we'll take a little overview on what the foundation is working on.
All right, and Mike, just a couple questions in case any council members have questions as well. The bike path crossing at Route 2, that is going to be crossing in front of the Walmart at the light.
Yes, we have the Aldi's Walmart light, and that was already engineered, and that's one of the things that's attractive about it. And again, most of the space of that bike trail is off-road, so we feel good about that. But it is a good crossing there, and it has a little Z, and then it'll make that link behind Dairy Depot to connect up with the Dustin Road right away that would go right across. Dustin Road, that becomes a paper street at Coy, and then, right at Coy, and then runs all the way over to that Dairy Depot site.
So, and then just to reiterate, so timeline, we think August, September for starting with road construction, infrastructure.
Yes, Paul, timeline on the roadway? That's correct. And really the roadway is the catalyst that tells the retail committees that these guys are really doing this. All right. Mark Rigg is looking to build a model as soon as it's practical for him to build a model in that space. As soon as the roadway work's done enough, they're looking, maybe do we do something in the southern? We have 37 lots there for Mark, and there's one other builder interested also. Mark wants to take the lead on it. We have maybe he'll build one of the lots in the cul-de-sac off Pickle without waiting for the road. We're kind of working through that timeline.
Very good. All right, next piece, we're going to kind of bring it over, and we want to thank individuals from our Oregon Economic Development Foundation who are here today, and its director, Summer Vrieselaar, who's here with us. Summer, will kind of hand it off to you and your folks so you can kind of walk us through some of what you got for today.
Thank you. I want to thank the Oregon Economic Committee, the mayor, and city administration for letting the foundation give a brief update. My name is Summer Vrieselaar. I am the executive director of the Oregon Economic Development Foundation. I'm going to start with just a little history of the Oregon Economic Development Foundation. Since 1993, the Oregon Economic Development Foundation has been a public-private partnership between the business community and the city of Oregon as a designated economic development arm of the city. The Oregon Economic Development Foundation works with a host of statewide, regional, and local officials and partners to bring economic opportunities to the city. The foundation has no authority to make decisions for the city. Its job is to seek out and present opportunities and to work with businesses and industry that continue to thrive in Oregon. The foundation is currently powered by 97 investors. We work closely with our private business investors, property owners, landlords, real estate agents, and brokers to help retain business, bring new business, and bring jobs to our area. A few of those partners consist of, and many of you are in this room now, Regional Growth Partnership, Jobs Ohio, Northwest Ohio Economic Development, Ohio Economic Development Association, which I currently serve on their board, Eastern Maumee Bay Chamber of Commerce, Toledo Chamber of Commerce, Oregon City Schools, Cardinal Stritch Catholic High School, Oregon Jerusalem Historical Society, Oregon Parks and Rec, ProMedica, Bay Park Hospital, and Mercy St. Charles Hospital. The past 5 years, there has been a great amount of Oregon economic development. Success stories start with the Oregon Clean Energy Plan, a $900 million investment creating 35 new jobs. It also provides $1 million annually to the Oregon City Schools. Interstate Chemical is a $62 million investment creating 40 new jobs. Music Fulfillment Services, $750,000 investment creating 30 new jobs in partnership with the NAI Harmon Group. And lastly, the most recent is our Adler-Pelzer Group, a $10 million investment creating 80 new jobs in partnership again with the NAI Harmon Group. The Oregon Economic Development Foundation works closely with the city and developers on the Town Center project. We work in partnership with the city currently to run the farmers market on behalf of the Eastern Maumee Bay Chamber of Commerce until they hire a new executive director. We're working with the Oregon Economic Development Foundation Marketing Committee and GIS WebTech on a marketing tool called Story Mapping to help market the Oregon, Ohio area. We're working with the Oregon Economic Development Foundation Membership Committee, Trustee Board, Executive Board, Lucas County, and Regional Growth Partnership on business retention and expansion visits, also called BREEZE, and growing our membership. We've been attending NORAD, OEDA, RGP, Jobs Ohio, networking information, and board meetings. We host investor, board, subboard, and trustee monthly meetings. We are currently interviewing for our open part-time administration position while keeping up on the daily office duties. And then lastly, we're hosting investor weekly retention meetings by phone, Zoom, and in person. On top of all the things the foundation has been doing, we also support many community events, one being our farmers market. East YMCA Turkey Trot, the Eastern Maumee Bay Chamber of Commerce Golf Outing, the Oregon Health and Welfare, the City of Oregon Tree Lighting Ceremony and Christmas events, the Oregon Haunted History Tour in partnership with the Oregon Jerusalem Historical Society, and Oregon City Schools Operation Graduation Drive Parade. We also funded the COVID-19 2020 Senior Picture Surprise Project in partnership with the Oregon City Schools Foundation. We were key leaders in the Great Ohio Bicycle Adventure in partnership with the Oregon City Schools. And then also helped launch the Dolly Parton Imagination Library for Oregon District Zip Codes in partnership with Toledo Refining Company, Mercy St. Charles, and Oregon City Schools Foundation. We also support our Fun Rec programs and their events as well. So if you want more information on the Oregon Economic Development Foundation, feel free to give us a call or check us out on our website at any time. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Summer. I don't know if anybody else has any questions. Just curiosity, just because I was in kind of on the early presentation and pieces of it. The story mapping piece.
Yes.
How are we doing with that? What's kind of timeline project? I mean, how's that coming along?
We have met with our Oregon Marketing Committee, and we're setting up a timeline. We're hoping to launch it come late fall on basically all the goods of Oregon. So our town project, our town center project, and the phases of the town center project on top of our parks and our trail systems and all the goods of Oregon. So we'll be seeing that hopefully late fall this year. Our first story map. And what's great about story mapping, it's not like a video. It evolves as our town center evolves. The story map evolves along with it. So it just markets everything that we have in Oregon. Some of our sites as well, our industrial sites, will market those.
Okay. Very good. Anything, Marvin, anybody? Tim? Mr. Seaman, please.
Well, I guess, I don't know if anybody can answer, but Mr. Beasley just walked out. Okay, I'll wait till he comes back. I got 2 questions.
Okay, all right,
I'll ask him if he'll allow me then, okay?
absolutely.
Oh, here he is, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering, Mr. Beasley, I have several constituents who are concerned about pickleball courts, and what the status of those, is. I have a second question too. Go ahead, that's the easy one.
Mr. Seaman and Chair, we did have a pickleball court coming in 2 ways. We have one set where we're just working with our Oregon Rec Department in cooperation with Oregon City Schools to take 2 of the tennis courts and at Facet? At Facet, and we're going to repaint those, and pardon? Starting soon. Starting soon, and we've been working on that with them for a while. And so those will be the first pickleball courts in our market. We're excited about, I think at least 2, maybe 3 will end up there. We have a second where we're looking with the Y long-term on utilization just south of our town center of their facilities. They have tennis courts that are underutilized and in disrepair, and to make something available in those spaces as well. So we think both of those can be assets. Again, rec is really invested in more diverse programming opportunities, as we all know. Obviously, with COVID, something slowed down, but that pickleball is one of them that we feel excited about.
There's some aficionados that play this at the YMCA, and they have all kinds of little details, not expensive.
Sure, we know.
Like which way it has to face for the sun, how far the fence has to be away from the court, and things like that. They're all really important, and each board has an input. They're not expensive things.
Okay, we'll make sure we do that.
Now, here's my second question.
Sure.
I was wondering now, we've had a lot of discussion about the birders, what place they can take in this total picture of everything we did. I thought that was an excellent presentation.
Okay.
I wonder just how we're gonna weave in the birders in your mind.
Mr. President, and well,
Please.
Mr. Chair, actually, and Mr. Seaman, just as a note, among the things that we recognized as an opportunity when we looked at, for instance, and someone raised the point, what's the challenge with birders just passing through and not stopping here? And we recognize that. One of the things we're blessed with is obviously a good part of Maumee Bay State Park is in the city of Oregon. We also have Pearson Park, which is in the north side, which present 2 different habitats from one type of bird that's going to be in the old growth. You can look for pileated woodpeckers in the old growth on the south side, and look for different types of birds on the north side. And I've done both. And those features, one of the things we wanted to make sure is we added hotels. Oregon added 2 strong hotel properties right on Navarre to make it easier. And those hotels fill up very much for Bird Week, and for other times the birders stay there as well. That is among the things been in our conversations with, and among the things in conversations with the potential operators of a new hotel is that strength of that market and the ability to market to that group as well. Kind of a place to be at the center of it, close to Lake Erie, close to those parklands, close to a bike trail that gets them there. The final piece is that long-term, Maumee Bay State Park has been the center of it. We don't want to try and detract from what they do with those events, but there's other events we could have in our town green that could be centered as programs about. As we've talked to developers about our town center, that's among the things they're interested in, is that we're not just going to build a town center. There'll be programming every week, events, things like that, and events that can center around that, events, anything from outdoor yoga classes to things for birders to things like that. That's among the things that we're interested in, those opportunities. Oregon is such a natural for that, that kind of excites us.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Seaman. Anybody else questions? Council? All right. Moving on, we want to get into the piece, and I'd asked Mr. Beasley and the administration to kind of put together a map and an overlay, and I think if we go forward, I think that's it. To kind of talk through current land use, zoning, what we have, where it's at, what's available, and then talk through that. I don't know if you want to get to the RGP before we get to
Sure.
this.
Well, we'll start out with, in general, what we have as between us and the foundation. In the obviously the greatest, we have two refineries that were here long before Oregon was here. They're, the young one is 102 years old, I think. The older one is 114. I don't know, 126. All right. Due to my extreme youth at the time, I wasn't there when it was open, but I wasn't much behind it. Those spaces were here first. We focused in partnership long before my time on assembling land in the north area for what is really labeled as our Cedar Point Industrial Park. I don't know if we can do a zoom on that or not. As well, we can't zoom very well. Okay, we'll get it. If people know, at the corner of Cedar Point and Blue Heron Drive, in those spaces is the heart of land that we have available. That land is owned by the foundation, but was purchased in partnership with funds from the Toledo Lucas County Port Authority, by the Oregon Economic Development Foundation, by the city of Oregon, maybe 20 years ago now, in that space, in the 15 to 20 years ago space. That is, we do have a couple of other parcels that are in that immediate area. We have a 20-acre parcel that is at the corner of Lallendorf and Corridor. You can see that in kind of the brown part right at the kind of the center of that map, the southwest corner of Navarre Lallendorf. That's kind of right across from the methanol facility. If we can, you can point at it for me. I'll do it. So if you know that facility right down the south end, there we go, right there. You know, we have that piece available. The other pieces that are controlled by the foundation are the kind of brown areas that are right along both Blue Heron and Parkway Drive. And those are those other brown that are industrially zoned and ready for development as you go. We could probably assemble relatively easily on some additional land that is industrially zoned on the white parcels. If you look at land that it's owned by the Jolins, one of the Jolin families immediately east of the brown parcels in our industrial park, that is under option currently for a large potential project. All right.
Look up this way.
You come, yeah, right there. Come on that land and south of that a little bit. We could probably assemble approximately about a 60-acre parcel there, a 30-acre parcel to the north of our proposed roadway that we're looking at. We have about another 10, 15 acres that could be available for development within our industrial park area, and that 20-acre parcel that we talked about at the corner of Lallendorf and Corduroy. The foundation does have a 40-acre parcel that we worked with the foundation to acquire, I think about 10 years ago now. That is kind of the green parcel right along Wynn Road, just south of Windscape. We also have a couple of parcels in Windscape that was developed about, people know Windscape right on Wynn Road on the north side. They are smaller industrial parcels. We are working actively to see if we can attract some rail-oriented light manufacturing facilities that are looking for that rail access along that line. And we are in, through the foundation, strong conversations on about folks that are looking at about 100,000 square foot building along that space, and another perhaps north and west of the railroad tracks on land that is owned by Norfolk and Southern. You know that one, if you can see the right, just come, right, and come a little bit over, kind of in that space, right over a little further over to the right. Yeah, right in that space. Land owned by Norfolk and Southern and land owned by First Energy, and some of the remainder parcel from the first construction of the Oregon power plant. We think we can assemble land there that maybe could host a 200,000 square foot building. In our typical experience, if in a 100,000 square foot building, we might be able to find 100 jobs. That kind of the space that we're looking for. 200,000 square foot building, maybe 120 jobs. But they're nice construction projects, good employers for the city. We have strong interest in all of those spaces, as folks know. But we have one other industrially owned area that is owned
south, kind of across from the tank farm at Oregon Clean Energy, at Toledo Refining. That is the land that used to belong to Sun Pipeline, that is along Wynn Road, just north of Bay Park Hospital, that is owned by privately owned agricultural use, but it is industrially zoned. That, there's been some conversations about, you could assemble about an 80-acre project there. As you look at it, I think there's 80 acres. There's a creek that transverses it, if you're aware of that. We're aware of that land as we go. Those are the sites that we have routinely in play that we discuss, Mr. Chair, that and we'll kind of talk through how a typical project comes in, and we might have Gary do that part of it. So here's how a project comes in, you have land, et cetera. One of the things that's different, and Gary Thompson can talk about a little bit, who, Gary used to be the economic development director for the foundation and is now vice president of the regional group and lives here in Oregon. One of the things that is really different, that's kind of led to some of the, let's call it the recent drama, is that almost all our conversations in my 30 plus years I've been doing this sort of thing have been about 30-acre sites, 50-acre sites, 20-acre sites, 10-acre sites. Even on a 7-acre site, you can do some things. You can put a 100,000 square foot building on a good 8-acre site if you got some drainage and other locations. One of the things that is new phenomena over the last few years that we've talked about is we have groups looking for very large parcels. That's something that's different for us. We didn't think we could or should compete in that space. We still aren't sure, but that's something that we think that we owe the community some conversation about. And this can be something long-term that the community has to wrestle with as we look to attract options. Maybe have Gary kind of take us through how a typical project comes through when you're ready for that.
Sure. I think we can go ahead and do that now. Gary, if you wouldn't mind, if you're ready, we'll kind of throw you right into it. So we've asked Gary, and Gary's from the Regional Growth Partnership, and Gary Thompson, thank you for being here with us. Just to kind of walk through the typical day in the life of what a project request starts with and where it goes from there.
Well, absolutely. Chairman Horniak, Mayor, City Council, Summer Vrieslar, I appreciate the invitation. The first thing I do want to do, though, is congratulate Summer and her work at the Oregon Economic Development Foundation. It's been a long time since it's had 93 members. So hats off to all you folks for keeping the foundation alive and well. I think there's a couple things about economic development that help set the table to explain a project. They're normal words, right? Economic development, everybody thinks they know what they mean. It's like when you go to your bank and say credit. That means very specific things. So the words economic development means specific things to us that practice that every day. There are 3 types of economic development projects. There are retention projects. Those are companies that are in your current area that for some reason are going to close, leave, get bought, mergered out of town, whatever the case may be. Those are projects nobody likes to work on, right? Because they usually don't end well. Luckily in Northwest Ohio, we're actually pretty successful in keeping companies here when we learn about that.
Mr. President, Mr. Chair, just to note, the challenge is we do a lot of those, but we can't talk about them very much.
Yeah, right. We also have expansion projects. Those are very nice. Those are companies that are here. You think of your typical automotive supplier, they may be making seats for Ford and they have a chance to make seats for General Motors. Their building's too small. Luckily, hopefully they're on a site that they can just add on to the building, double the size of their facility, and do those kinds of things. Those 2 types of projects are really the most important. That keeps what you have in your community, which is a lot easier to do. The 3rd type is attraction type, and it's the type that gets all the press for all kinds of reasons. When Peloton shows up in Wood County, everybody gets excited about it, and everybody loves it, and it's great, and it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. They don't realize that Wood County was preparing for Peloton to come some 18 years ago to that site. They just didn't know it was Peloton that would be there. And then again, when you start to put something there that wasn't there before, it causes change. So a lot of times you have issues related to infrastructure, buffer zones, all those kinds of things that create maybe issues for residents that live in the current area. So you have to kind of work through all those issues on attraction projects. At the RGP, we're a privately owned foundation, right? So we are not a government agency. And you'll see kind of all these parts of economic development work together. We're run by business people that invest and become members. So we don't care necessarily about political boundaries. We care about business assets. The other two types of agencies that generally exist in economic development are state-related agencies. So you have those with the Development Services Agency and Jobs Ohio. They have a big geographic boundary, right? It's the entire state of Ohio. And then you have local agencies, much like Lucas County Economic Development Agency or the Oregon Economic Development Foundation, right? So if things go to Northwood, Summer of Riesler doesn't get a gold star, right? If things go to Northwood or Oregon at the RGP, we get gold stars. So those kinds of things all work together. So if you think about a typical project over the course of the last 25 years, this little cottage industry of site selection consultants has grown up, and it's grown really out of big accounting firms and real estate firms. And it's much like a blue ribbon commission at the federal government, right? If you're the CEO of Pepsi and you need a new warehouse in the Midwest, every employee you have is going to say, well, put it in my hometown. Or maybe your spouse went to University of Miami for college, so let's put it there. You get a very biased opinion. So these consultants come in and very unbiasedly evaluate all the data. These projects, and this has been happening much like everything else, quicker and quicker, right? So companies at the RGP, we're the agency that really has been assigned by all those other, whether you're the state, the locals, or the regional group, we've been assigned that idea of the attraction, to go out and get things to come to Northwest Ohio that aren't here already. We like to say we make that economic pie bigger, because we think Summer of Riesler is more than capable of visiting companies in Oregon and talking to them and learning about their needs and helping those things move along. So the work we do when Peloton comes here, right? So all of you that are involved in charities, and when you go to the charity event, in the back of the t-shirt says everybody that sponsors everything, right? Oregon School is going to have a new, probably career tech sponsor, I'm sure, once they learn about Peloton. Well, we're going to add Peloton to that name. So we like to say it lightens the load for all the other businesses in the area. We think it's a good thing. We also tend to think if your community is not growing, it's probably dying, right? So we like some amount of growth. Those projects from those consultants or corporate real estate departments come through. They're always very confidential and anonymous. So if we happen to learn the name of a company, we have to sign a non-disclosure agreement about that, so we can't discuss it. Part of the reason we're a private organization, right? We're not subject to sunshine laws and all those kinds of things. So we can work very quickly. We can work across political boundaries. We can engage partners like Summer or other county officials and say, hey, this is what we're looking for. The timeline on those projects has moved up incredibly. There's a group, the Site Selectors Guild is about 50 of the top leading site selectors in the country. We're a partner of the Site Selectors Guild, so they know how to talk to us. What we do when we get the information about a project, hey, we need 100 acres, 400 acres, 1,000 acres. We start to look through our information that we have into our local communities about where can we find this. This project needs rail access, it needs highway access. This company wants to be in a rural area, this company wants to be in a suburban area. We mix all those things together and we start figuring out where might this make sense. I can tell you in the last 90 days, we've had 17 projects come in the automotive space alone. Mr. Beasley is exactly right. These projects used to be in terms of, hey, we need like 50 acres. Now it's 200 acres, 400 acres, 800 acres. They're billion-dollar investments. The amazing thing is, I always thought they would be very low job creators, right? And that has been getting disproportionate as things automate and workforce becomes harder to get. But most of these projects are very heavily, they're big job creators. They're 500 jobs, 1,000 jobs, 4,000 jobs, those kinds of, so they're very attractive from an economic development perspective. And some of the if you're familiar with the automotive industry, we have autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, connected vehicles. There's a change coming in the automobile industry. Ohio is the #1 supplier state in the union for automobiles, and we have a number of assembly plants here, one in Toledo as well. So and I see Scott Hayes is here, so should the world move from petroleum fuel to electric cars, and if Ohio doesn't get our fair share of that, think about the things that we won't need anymore. There's an engine plant in Lima. There's a transmission plant in Toledo. There's a transmission plant in Perrysburg. There's all kinds of things. So just to give you a sense of what that means, in an internal combustion motor from transmission, there's about 24,000 parts. And think about the number of people it takes to make those parts. In an electric powered car, there's about 200 parts. So that's going to be a disproportionate decrease in employment, we believe. And whether it's the state, the region, or the local community, folks that have those automobile assets, we think should be looking at this generational opportunity, because they're not going to come. Once these facilities get built, they're built. You don't get one every 6 months. We're in, I think, in my opinion, about a 36-month window where we have these opportunities. And they're coming to us through these consultants. They're coming very quickly. They want large acreage, and we're scrambling, trying to land our fair share here in Northwest Ohio. And for lots of reasons, some of that I'm very familiar with, there's a potential to do some of this in Oregon, but the community has to investigate that. And there's a site consultant I know in Atlanta. His favorite phrase is no product, no project. You can't bring a company to town and put them through a whole process. They have to kind of know that land's available. We can get this done in this community, or the land, or that community has already done the work to plan for that. So it behooves city officials or their representatives to talk to landowners and say, hey, can we do these kinds of things? Maybe for this, maybe not for that. When I was the Oregon Economic Development Foundation director, and when Dean Monsky, who's my boss, had the job before me, there was a little map in our office, and we went out and talked to property owners every year, once a year, because sometimes they wanted to sell, sometimes they didn't. None of them had a sign in their yard. So all of that kind of communication is normal. And should things look like they would align, then the community gets to decide, right? The public process starts and the community gets to decide. And you ultimately end up with, which is what's going to happen just down the road on I-280 later or early next month when Peloton breaks ground. So that's kind of how the run of show for how a project works. They're very fast. They're very fast moving. It's a lot of confidential information. And ultimately, though, it all comes under the light of day.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. If you don't mind, just.
I was going to ask you if you have any questions.
Absolutely. Thank you. The time frame. So that's condensing in just about every industry, every business, every different type of thing that's out there, right? Our society today wants everything. We want it today or we want it yesterday. From your experience, just say over the last 5 years, how that's condensed. Did we go from months to weeks, from weeks to days? I mean, how fast are these things coming forward?
We really went from years to months. So when I first started at the RGP, if I go back 5 years, you really would get a call in 2021 for people. The earliest was 36 months out or 3 years out. They were looking to, start construction. Maybe it takes a year to build the plant, so you're 4 years out. I can tell you, just yesterday, we had a conversation with a company that we talked to this year that said, hey, we want production to begin in 2024, Q4. This morning, they said, no, that we'd really like that to be 2023, Q4. So they just took a year off. So we're talking about somewhere between 18 and 20 months to find them a spot. And that is kind of the new norm. You have to have things ready in 24 months. It creates a huge struggle for the electric utilities, especially for people that need transmission level service, because there's just a lot of red tape, other bureaucratic work that has to be done before First Energy or AEP or anybody else can extend a big power line. And that holds up. We've lost projects because of that. So we're in a inside 24-month window today.
And
I hope it
that's
doesn't go to 6 months.
I was going to say, and that's basically from, I'll say, the incoming call to your office saying, we've got a project we're interested in, till actual construction of the project.
Yeah, you're looking at 24 months.
Okay. And some of the timelines as far as the information request, how fast is that timeline?
So there's other people in the room that have dealt with this on a more daily basis. Doug Bourne is sitting behind me, who now works at Lucas County, and he used to do this work for us at the RGP, and he did a good job of it. It is not unusual for us to get a less than, let's say, 100 questionnaire. For example, how much water capacity is available? What's the water rates? What does your tax structure look like? On a Tuesday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And companies or consultants want that completed by Thursday at the end of the day because they're having a team meeting on Friday. We like to get at least a week to do that. We would prefer 2 weeks, but that's anywhere from 2 days to 10 days anymore. Going back 20, 30 years, when you would get that call, people would actually either get in a car or get in a plane and come here. And they would spend like 3 days in the community, and then they would go spend 3 days somewhere else and 3 days somewhere else. And we just don't, that's part of this, how this consulting business popped up. I think they told people, we can save a lot of time for you. We'll get to the data right away.
Mr. Chair, just as a note, and that sort of turnaround, one of the things the foundation does is almost weekly looks at questionnaires like that. That'll be up to 100. And Summer Vriesler has the job of filling those things out, and maybe right away just reject it. You know, we had one that came in last week that they said they wanted 50 acres on rail with this amount of water, this amount of electricity. We could have done, 90% of what they wanted. We couldn't give them 50 acres on rail. But we're trying to see that kind of piece that's northwest of the tracks. Can we assemble it and have the parking under the First Energy power lines? Those sorts of things. But that's an every week transaction for the foundation. They're fast turnaround. And among the things that the challenges that happen, and we'll respond, they'll say, and again, in cases, and it gets to be controversial, obviously, that say, boy, when we want to know, would you be interested in this location if we could get this property? And they might, many times the answer is no. And so we move on and you don't do it. Other times they'll say, we would be interested. Yeah, we'd be interested if you have that property. And that's when you go knock on the door and said, are you interested in selling? And many times when people say no, and then the project moves on then. That happens a lot. All right, where they say, no, we're not interested, and then it moves on. Among the challenges, again, those don't mean the project would go, even if those property owners said yes. That just means you begin a zoning process and that broader public discussion. Go ahead.
Let me just interject. So there's a misconception, I think, by many government officials and the general public, because they use the term site selection. The process is really elimination. If you do one thing wrong, you're gone. There's no time to come back and do those things again. So it's a cutthroat business. I mean, if you say, I made the mistake, I didn't work in economic development at the time, but I had someone in the car and there were some folks on strike, and we drove by that. And consultant, he was from Chicago, said, don't ever take anybody by a visitor by something like, I didn't know they were out there with the yellow rat, but it just says the wrong message. When we have so many more positive things to say about whether it's labor or our community or what. So it is a process of elimination. They are looking for every excuse to cut you off the list. There's no time to say, oh, well, we could do this or we could do that. No, so the recent terms that I've heard from people are simplicity and certainty. That's what people want to know in this business.
Mr. Chair.
Please, Mr. Beasley.
And again, that process is just to get in the room. The community then has to go through the process of deciding, does it want it? It's the job of the Regional Growth Partnership, County Economic Development, Oregon Economic Development Foundation, its board, to present those opportunities. In the administration, we believe we should present those. Ultimately, the council and the process has got to say, we're not interested in that. That's something we don't want to do. And as we've talked before in other examples, that happens frequently. It happens regularly. I mean, it is stopped in a lot of ways. We had a project that was hot, as we all have talked about a couple months ago, that not enough property owners were interested. The project moved on. It's gone. All right. Other examples are the question for the community, though, that we have to engage at some point is, are we interested in those opportunities in the future? What does it mean? What sort of things could go there? And the community that's a long-term issue, but as Gary points out, who lives just the other side of Stadium Road.
Right, I'm trying to get that bike path extended over there.
All right, get that bike path. It's an easy path. Just come right down. Who lives just the other side of Stadium Road. The community has to decide, we really have a hot window where there's companies over the next 36 months that are going to be looking for things that Oregon has a lot of. Maybe the community doesn't want them, but we've got to figure out what process we want to go through we believe it's our job to present those opportunities and have the council and the community say, nah, we don't want it. You know, we don't need it, or we want other things. But- Or
Chairman,
some
can I
do,
leave-
you know,
I'll
or
leave
some
with two
do.
things. So one is, at the RGP, we believe in really creating wealth for individuals, for companies, and for communities. And this opportunity that's in front of us in this automobile space, like, it's going to happen and it's going to be over. And what people that are older than I said, this is what Ohio looked like when Honda came to Marysville. There was a big rush and then it was over. So sometimes you have to act a little outside the norm and say, hey, we have an opportunity here and we have to think about it and seize it or not seize it. And finally, I would just say, I practice economic development because it's about, I think, enhancing people's lives, right? So I'm raising children here in Oregon. I see how Gregory, the superintendent of the schools, is sitting there, and he's educating kids that are going to go off to college. And then where are they going to go after that? Are they going to move to Chicago, Boston, or our number one place where everybody out of Northwest Ohio goes, Columbus, Ohio? And then when I have grandkids, I want them to come over and be able to jump in my pool. So if we bring the kind of opportunities to our community or our region that involves high-tech, R&D, good manufacturing jobs that provide 6 additional jobs for every good manufacturing job, people that are younger tend to go, wow, I can work in a factory like that, or I want to get involved in electrical engineering, and I have jobs and opportunities here now in Northwest Ohio. I don't have to go to Boston or Chicago or Columbus. So that's why we do the work here in Northwest Ohio at the RGP, and we're proud to represent the people of Northwest Ohio. I travel all around the world. Whenever I say I'm from Oregon or Toledo, nobody's ever kicked me, yelled at me, or anything like that. So we have a great reputation, and part of it is all the work you guys do as city council members, elected officials, and administrative officials. So from the economic development community, I just want to say hats off and thanks for doing the work every day.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Gary. Mr. Seaman, did you have something?
Well, I'd like to just make a comment, like, and then if these industrial things happen, like you're talking about, you know, keep our kids and grandkids here working, I mean, all the quality of life things that everybody's interested in will naturally come, because all those people will be coming in the city to work, and new restaurants and things like that, and other small businesses that are not really part of regional growth, but are very important to our citizens. That will all happen too, so that's obvious, and they go hand in hand. The other thing is, a few years ago, the economic development folks would always say, the one key word, you know, they're talking about keywords is being prepared. You know, in other words, you have a piece of land that has a lot of infrastructure, it's ready, and maybe the zoning's even ready, and it can happen quickly, like you're describing.
Thank you, Mr. Seaman. Any other questions into that topic? And then we'll kind of throw it into the bigger kind of arena. And again, thank you, Gary. You know, appreciate you being here and appreciating us walking through that. Like I said, just, you know, understanding the projects that are out there, the opportunity that is in the marketplace, and Oregon as a community has to have that discussion internally and then externally, whether that's an opportunity that it wants to pursue or not. And again, whether that makes sense or not. One thing you did talk about, and I'm going to speak to it in very layman's terms, is if all those things happen and a site selection group comes down to 3 sites, before anything goes forward, all that has to go to the community. So the zoning changes or the zoning questions have to be brought through the community as part of a legal public hearing process for those decisions and that discussion to be had. So we've had a lot of people that have said, well, they're trying to take their land, they're trying to do this. No, there is a process and there is a protocol that everybody has to go through. There is no eminent domain. We want to develop it, so let's go do it. That doesn't exist any longer. It is a dialogue with the community. And at that point, city officials like ourselves get a little bit more information about, okay, what exactly are we talking about? So there is a lot of cloak and dagger, I'll say, when these projects come up, because nobody wants to tell their competitors where we're going to develop or grow. So sometimes they do come in a little bit of a shroud of mystery. But at the point where it becomes real, the community knows what it's talking about, by and large, or has a pretty good idea of what we're talking about. You're smiling. I'm kind of both. I'm asking you to disagree, I guess, would be the case.
I don't disagree with you at all. And
Okay.
so the the document I would point to in many ways is at some point, a site plan needs to be submitted. Some companies might submit a site plan through their attorney. However, it's still going to have a building with dimensions, with drainage ditches, parking spaces, all those things. It'll have a class industrial use. Oh, they're going to do this in that building. You'll know those things. You might not know
The
at
name,
that point the name, the company name,
correct,
but it certainly would be, you would know what you're getting into and the partner you're going with.
correct.
Going to the dance with, so to speak. So,
Yep.
Yes, and it becomes very public at that point. Up till then, understand many of these companies are negotiating incentives from the state, the regional and the local level. So they like to have people compete against each other.
Mhm.
They're, to your point, they may have a competitor in the neighborhood. They don't want them to know they're coming and all those kinds of things. So there are lots of very legitimate business reasons to keep the name of that company is quiet for as long as you can. But ultimately, you are exactly correct. The community is going to get a site plan. It's got to get approved.
Thank you. Mr. Beasley.
Among the challenges for legislative leadership and ultimately all of the community long-term, when you look at these challenges, are the best way is the process. You say, okay, we have some landowners interested in selling. In some cases they are, some not, but let's say they wanted to sell. Take the Home Depot Kohl's opportunity that was here before my time. This room was very full. Home Depot was looking to come to the site, the old Dairy Depot site, and Kohl's was going to build right next door to it. And I was county administrator at the time, so I was talking to the Oregon officials about it at the time. And we wanted, county's interest was, we were happy to have that retail stay in Lucas County and not go to Wood County. And we had it was a passionate meeting here in Oregon. This room was very full. The property owners in that case said, yes, we'd like to sell. Then they had the zoning and the community put some conditions on because, you know, people who live nearby didn't want it. It's just what it was. And the community said no. And both the Kohl's and Home Depot went out to Route 20, and we kind of lost some opportunity then to have the restaurants that followed it and that sort of thing. It is in some ways, though, that's the community's job to say yes or no to those things. But one of the challenges we face is that, and a community has to come to grips with how it wants to deal with it long term. And the members, the people here from our residents and the council, is that a lot of, that's the way it used to work more. Some companies are now saying, look, unless it's zoned, I don't even want to talk to you anymore. That is, they want to know that that's some certainty. Not all the time, but that's one of the things when we get sites that we talk to. Some say, submit sites that could find water and sewer and rail and workforce and highway transport. We don't care about the zoning. If we're interested in coming there, then the committee will go through its process. The other challenge is there are ones who say, hey, I'm not even going to put you on the list unless the zoning's already done. So that's a challenge for all of us to come to grips with. And that's hard and controversial. And, you know, what do you mean I have to zone it ahead of time? I don't even know what's going there. And I have a harder time controlling it. So those are things, I don't know if Gary has any thoughts on that, or those are hard decisions for a community. And it's easy for us in our industrial area where we've focused, we thought that would meet all our needs. The change has been the new phenomena, this opportunity, and I don't know the answer where people say, no, Gary, we want 280 acres or we can't even talk to you, or 340 acres, we can't talk to you. You had one that wanted 1,000 acres, you know, not in the room. Those are hard decisions for a community and what it means. So, you know, it's tough to be the legislative authority. It's our job to make those things, to present them as options, and the community can say yes or no, but we still have to present those options. But the legislative authority is stuck with the decision ultimately, and the community is as well. Those are hard calls.
Archie, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
before-
please,
Before you
Mayor.
get
Mayor
far along,
Safarian,
one of the
please.
things that we have to look at is the math of the situation too. If we were looking at approximately making up $5 million worth of income for the city of Oregon, figuring one job of a person making $50,000 a year brings the city of Oregon about $1,200. So to make up $5 million, you have to have about 5,000 jobs. If we got our industrial base in our northern section of the city, where we have little parcels and that are, most of the projects Mike Beasley brought up employed 100 people, 80 people, or smaller numbers of people. If we get 100, we would have to have 50 of those developed to get the 5,000 jobs to bring $5 or $6 million to make us whole again. That's why we were looking at innovative ways to try to make that up a little faster. And so we were trying to have every opportunity that was possible to keep us in good financial shape.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think that's, that's part of the question is, sometimes we have to ask the questions that not everybody likes to have. Opportunities are available. Our role is to ask the community, is this what we want to do? Is this what we want to be? There's a long-term future, to Gary's point, and I think your window is probably about spot on. There's an appetite right now for who puts themselves in position for what comes next. So if you don't put a shovel in the ground in the next 18 months, you're behind your competitor. So I think there is a lot of that. So I think we will wrestle with this over the coming years of what that needs to be. Based on what we have here, talking a little bit more, I'll say just general conversation in land use, and I'd encourage anybody in the know up here to kind of add into it. Based on what I'll say the City of Oregon or Oregon Economic Development Foundation has under control today, meaning land either optioned available to development or land that is owned by the foundation. Was the number right? 55 acres of what is owned?
About 55 acres that what we own. I would think that there would be another 60 acres that we've had, as Gary talked about in his role. He's talked to people who are adjacent to those that would you be interested in selling if a project came along? And there's probably another 60 acres like that could be available, or an 80-acre project, depending on the moment. But that changes from time to time. Maybe I'd like to sell, but my brother doesn't, or that happens. It's part of life, and the families have the right to do that. And they will, and frequently they might say, well, we'll wait and see what happens, and what's going on then, and what our family's doing, and it's a piece of farmland, and that again, and sometimes it pits neighbor against neighbor, and those are hard things for a community and for legislative authority. These are hard struggles. All right.
Okay. Thank you. So in what we have available, the largest parcel of land we could cobble together in our industrial area today is
About 80-acre parcel.
about an 80-acre parcel.
There's others that if we chose to go into other areas that might be zoned residential or zoned agricultural, that we have opportunity to assemble other larger spaces. We have some uses that are consistent with, that we're interested in agricultural uses, that we looked at maybe putting together 200+ acre site that is closer to our industrial area, that there's conversation and interest in. That's something we've talked to. And obviously, once we start talking to property owners, they know that we're about talking to them. They've told their neighbors and friends. We're looking at uses that are consistent and work well with other agricultural uses. We've looked at some of those uses and some of those possibilities. But in terms of actual control, we've got, let's just kind of go through the list that's zoned the right way. We have the 20-acre parcel at the corner of Lollendorf and Corduroy. We have the land that is in the actual Cedar Point Industrial Park we have 3 5.7 acre parcels running north-south along that road. We have about 15 acres that are bifurcated up at the top with the detention in it that's adjacent to Fresenius Medical Device Manufacturing. There's another 3-acre or 2-acre parcel that's adjacent to that. We have some land owned in private hands that I think is interested in maybe put together another 5-acre, 8-acre parcel south of that. We have a couple of parcels right along Corduroy Road across the street that south, that you can put together maybe a 10, 15-acre development in that space. We have the parcels that are owned in Windscape that are the parcels that are, and then the land, we have probably 10 acres industrially zoned just south of that we could assemble that we're working on assembling some rail adjacent parcels that could work there. That we have automotive manufacturing interested in light manufacturing and assembly in about 100 100,000 square foot building, which could be a nice employer. Maybe another that's talked about a 200,000 square foot building on the other side of the tracks. But those are relatively smaller spaces. The land that the foundation acquired from Marge Steele a few years ago is, I think that yellow, it was 40 acres. Only the northern 10 of it is industrially zoned. The southern 30 acres of that is along Wynn Road, is potentially available, but it's not zoned for industrial right now. We're not looking, as we've all talked over the years, we think Oregon has taken its share of heavy smokestacks. We're looking for things that look like nice buildings where you put things together inside. You know, we've told, and as we've talked to the region about looking around, we've taken our share here of the heavy smokestacks. We look for things that either are, and even things, let's put it out there, the power plant, Oregon Clean Energy. You know, there's not a lot of things we can do to provide $1 million a year to the school. It's a nice local employer. A lot of contractors work in and out of there. Local contractors that are in this market are in and out of there all the time. But some people say, boy, you got all that steam coming off. And it's just one of the things that a community faces. Now, all that is evaporating water, all right, from their cooling ponds, and it's about 1/1000th of what evaporates off the bay every hour. All right, but it's still, you notice it. It's something that communities say, oh, I don't like that. So I mean, those are calls for the community. We are really most interested in buildings where they assemble things with low impact challenges. That's kind of what we're looking to try and find and bring in. You know, look at the buildings like Fresenius, or look at the buildings like that are kind of an attractive, some of the things in our Autoneum, the buildings that Adler-Pelzer has. Those aren't bad neighbors, but if you depending what you have, you might not want that next year. Those are challenging, tough questions for the community to go. The other site that is worth mentioning, we do talk, and it's owned by a former council member who, an agricultural business man, that he's got an 80-acre site we've had conversations with him from time to time. It's got good expressway access. And again, it's across the street from a tank farm. You say for the right project, you talk about it. That's not another site that's available to us, but we can't put together, it'd be hard to put together 200 acres and very hard to put together 300 in that space. Those are things that so in that area, impossible. So those are the challenges we face. I look at these parcels all the time, and you know, people know I stare at that screen and look at them. These are hard calls, but they're community calls as you come to grips with them. Right?
Very good. All right. Did anybody else have anything else as far as questions, talking through land use or going through some of that? And as we talked about with the space, you know, that was kind of the other questions I had jotted down before we got here, is if we wanted to be involved in that conversation. Thank you, Mr. Seaman. Go ahead.
Yes, yeah, and maybe Mr. Beasley could explain just briefly and generally, like when a company comes, there's like infrastructure updates that are required, but it's still feasible. Like how does rebates and tax factors for both the state and TIFs and all that kind of work? Just give a brief overview of that.
Mr. Chair, members, just in terms of generally how those things work, it's a competitive market to attract a strong employer, and it is a given that they're going to expect a significant governmental incentive package. Those packages come from the state overwhelmingly. It's a state, you know, there are state grants and state funds that go for it. Among the things you look at are, you know, okay, what would they pay for the land? If they pay for the land enough, could that cover for extension of some of the water or sewer infrastructure associated with it? Those are among the things that you put in a proposal. Among the things that we would look to partner with the state on, or with the utilities on the extension of significant utility lines, if they need a 69 kV line or a larger. I mean, some of these manufacturers look when they say we want 270 megawatts of power, or 250 megawatts of power, which are large users. In those cases, the local utility will generally look to extend those things at their cost. So not involved in it. The city is blessed that we have, you know, a strong water and sewer utility that can be competitive, that
The large users are one of the things that keep all of our rates lower. Well, Oregon has the lowest water rates in Ohio, as far as we know. If there's somebody else lower, we haven't found them. And without BP as pulling 5-6 million gallons a day, our rates would all be higher. I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, we have to understand that. But those are trade-offs. Without them, and Toledo Refining is Toledo's largest water customer, though they're primarily in Oregon. Those are the factors that help keep rates low. And having that infrastructure available, we have the infrastructure that allows us to serve heavy industry. Oregon has invested it over time because we had heavy industry here. There are fewer refineries that we had historically. Years ago, there was 3. We had also we had a coal-fired electric generating plant that now only works off of that old plant is now working at about 1/3 of its old capacity. That works with the pet coke byproduct from the BP refinery in a partnership. But those facilities, some of those have their own intakes on the lake, but most of them, or the bay, most of them depend on Oregon as we go. But that's part of the negotiations for every project. The state is the biggest provider of those incentives, but the local government steps up. We generally end up with a tax abatement decision with a payment of lieu of taxes. So take the example of Oregon Clean Energy, that we were competing with other places they were looking at places in other states. We standard packages a tax abatement package, and we negotiated a $1 million payment in lieu of taxes to the schools. We felt that was a great project for the schools and for Oregon, and we felt good about negotiating that and deliver that. We have a tentative agreement for a second plant that would additionally provide a very similar number to the schools if it goes forward. We're in the pre-development phase with that. It was delayed by House Bill 6, as folks know. That was finally repealed through a blend of legislation and litigation, and that project's back in play again. And those are all called, any project you bring in has some people want to have a drugstore next to them and some people don't want it. Some people want to have a plant because it provides jobs, some don't. Those are tough calls for communities always, but it's a process we have to go through.
One thing, Mr. Beasley, Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
like the air quality in Oregon. Tell me about that. That is important. I mean, jobs are important, and collecting taxes, we have to do that. We know that. But what about, that's a quality of life issue. Our lungs. Can you address that for me, please?
Sure, Mr. Chair.
Please.
Members. Again, these are community decisions. We feel good that Oregon's air has actually never been cleaner. The biggest emitters, there's something called a major Title V permit through the EPA. If you look at, I don't have it in front of me here, but I can dig it up. Maybe I'll share it. Maybe we can post it on our website. I don't know. These are private, because that's not a current, if it's a few years old. The Oregon's air has actually never been cleaner. Our refineries are cleaner than they've ever been. We used to have more of them. They were mostly unregulated. The biggest emitters of the reportable environmental emissions are the coal-fired plants that surrounded Lake Erie. So the biggest emitter, Title V permit holder in our region is the Monroe coal-fired plant. The second biggest used to be our own plant along the lake, the Bay Shore. It was the second biggest emitter of pollution sources in the region. Our own plant is significantly lower. The good news for, depending on what side you're looking at it on, but I felt good about it, and I'll admit this, almost all the coal-fired plants that surround Lake Erie are now shut down. And a gas plant produces the same amount of electricity with, I think, about 5% of the reportable emissions as a coal-fired plant and about 50% of the carbon footprint. So those of us, I'm in the camp that cares about both of those issues. I know some don't. I care about the reportables. I also care about carbon footprint. And so from my end, and I think I told council members 10 years ago that, hey, I'm in the camp that thinks that we will be better off if we can transition away from coal dependence for things like our birds and our lungs and those sorts of things. So that gradual change from coal dependence matters. So our air here with that reduction in size of one of the largest Title V emitters is a win for us. The regulatory changes, I know my friends at the refineries, they would like to be clean. They like to be clean. They would like to do it on their own, but the regulations have helped them be cleaner. There's some days there's too many of it. It's not handled well from the federal EPA side. But at the end of the day, these plants have never had fewer emissions than they have now. And the air has never been cleaner from them. So that's a win for Oregon and its future. The plants have been here for, we had a third one, Gulf Refinery, that was kind of tucked up kind of the north and west. So again, from an emission standpoint, I do feel good about our Title V permit status. And again, there's the carbon footprint debate, but also the reportables debate. Both of those are going on, and I kind of follow both of those. Our refineries are Title V permit holders and do have emissions for those jobs. That's part of the trade-offs in the community that they were here before we were, and part of those trade-offs as well. So most of the big project we were just looking at wasn't even a major permit holder that they were looking at. They would have been a minor permit holder, the one we were looking at. But the other projects in general, we feel good about our outcomes as we go. Oregon Air, everything you decide to put in, every time you plat a subdivision where people drive further out, adds bigger footprint of emission. Those are decisions that a community makes. But that's part of the trade-off. Most of us drove here. We're adding to that footprint as well. And that's the challenge we look at as well as you look at it. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley, Mr. Seaman. Any questions from any other members? Council, anybody from the committee? Nothing? Before we get in, because I do want to open up for questions for some limited time that we do have available kind of relevant to today. I do want to thank Summer Vrieselaar from our Oregon Economic Development Foundation for the presentation and information shared today. To Gary Thompson, again, same information. Appreciate you kind of sharing some of that information. I do want to extend, very, very much so to Mr. Beasley, who, as we've talked about this and looked at these things, I know has spent a lot of time looking at what these opportunities are. And before we get to that, say we as a collective group, meaning those of us sitting on this side of the table and those of us sitting on that side of the table, have to ask that question of, do we want to participate in the opportunity that presents itself over the next few years? And if so, where and how? And I think as we continue out through our discussions, I think that will continue to take place, because I think as a responsible leader for the city, I think we have to ask the question. And I think it's our job to present the question to the community. When the community says yes or no, and again, we know what we're talking about and know what we want to attract. And, to the points made earlier, there's things that have said, is Oregon interested? And Oregon has said, no, we've got enough of it. But there are things that do make sense. There are opportunities that Oregon may want to participate in, at least being in consideration. So I do think the ask is appropriate. And then I think the community interjection is absolutely imperative to the process, making sure that we do have that conversation, because it's all of our city. It's not the 8 people sitting up here who put our names on a ballot. It's not the individuals who work in the offices around these buildings. It's our entire community. It's the 20,000+ people who, as you were saying, the biggest leak of our talent is to Columbus. My daughter moved to Columbus a year ago. I'd love to have her back home. She loves her coffee shop on the corner. She loves her Starbucks. She loves her town center that they have available. That's why the town center development is something we've been working on for years, prior to me even arriving onto this council. We're trying to create those opportunities. And I think we're right for asking the question to consider that. And then I think the conversation is with the community. What's the fit? What do we want to do long-term as a community? Because I think we all share the same values. We all love the farmland. We all love the shoreline. We all love the quiet parks. But we all like low taxes. We all like city services, and we all like great schools. That's always where the balance comes into play. So with that, I'll open it up to anybody that might have any questions based on today's conversation. Rod, I'd ask you to step to the microphone and just state your name and your address. We're not, do you have a sign in?
Can you hand that?
Yeah, can you hand that to me, Rod? Thank you. I didn't know you had one out there. Okay. Thank you. Please, Rod.
Yeah, I'm Rod Jerky, 6461 Brown Road. 3 quick questions, or 4 actually, but 3 involving stuff that no one really cares about here. Bike
Swimming?
paths.
No.
Bike paths. Bike paths are really cool. The one concern I have is as you go up towards Bayshore, the connecting points between driveways and the paths. It's bump, 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 all the way down through. And so to have them are great. You got to maintain them or somehow figure out once the land sinks how to fill those in. Number 1. Number 2, long-term connecting into the Genoa bike path that rides clear over to halfway to Cleveland. If there's ever a way to, allow people to be able to ride that kind of situation. 3rd point on bike paths is the legality of bikes on sidewalks. From an insurance standpoint, we have a pending claim right now in court where our insured was riding a bike across Navarre Avenue. The city code says you're not supposed to ride bikes on the sidewalk. The gentleman turning right on red hit her, and therefore their defense is you're supposed to be walking your bike across the road. And so there's a little bit of legality that needs to be worked out as we cross Navarre Avenue with a bike path.
Good. Let me deal with each
Mr.
of those
Beasley.
3, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
As many people know, I bike about 3,500 miles a year.
Yep.
And I've biked every mile of our bike paths in the last month in Oregon. I know the bump bump. I feel good about the improvement on Star with that change, getting rid of the click, click, click. But we're looking at that for our engineering team and what it means and how do we get it. You put it in, it's in good shape. The places where you're crossing driveways, there are challenges. We can't promise perfection there. We like to be off the road. And that's a trade-off. If I'm on the road in a lane, I get less bump. When we're off, we feel like we're safer, but we have driveways and change. So those are things our engineering team will continue to look at, and we'll let Paul kind of join in on that in a minute on as well. On the heading south connection, Paul and Rodney in our shop we've had some great conversations with Wood County in our section here. Northwood and other parts of Wood County as well in connection. You want to talk a little bit about that connection opportunity, Paul? I think it'd be fun.
Yeah, I think I think in general, our paths are multi-use paths. They're meant for pedestrians and bicyclists. A lot of the bicyclists prefer to be on the road, and they know the rules, and that's where they're at. And perhaps the younger bicyclists, the younger people will use the bike paths because it's multi-use. But yeah, and we've had grants where we try to crack seal and try to improve on that. If it settles, we try to make it as smooth as possible, but it's difficult. It's much nicer when we go off road. We're going through a field, or that is
perfect.
That is the way to go. So so when we were planning the Oregon Town Center, and the idea, I live in Hallschild, so I'm on the south side of Navarre. There didn't seem to be much connection to the north side. The north side seemed to have the bulk of the bike path, but for those south of Navarre didn't have it, Bury and so on. And with the Oregon Town Center, the idea, we've done the main, bike path connecting schools and the parks, to Pearson, to the state park and so on. And that's to me like the highway of your bike paths, but now it's to create branches off of that and to extend it to other areas. And so Oregon Town Center became another path to take. So from Deer Depot, that's there on Navarre, to go down a little bit across Schmidlin on Dustin Paper Street. So then from Oregon Town Center, the more we thought about it, we thought, well, what if we went south? Northwood's planning like their own community center. So if we were able to go from Oregon Town Center through the Y property to Brown, and then eventually to Curtis and take Lemoyne, they have I think it's called Water Street that goes dead into the old, Woodville Mall.
Mm-hmm.
That is a path that could easily be made. There's also thoughts of, well, what if you continue down Lemoyne? You have Northwood High School, another connector point. If you really go far in Lemoyne, you'll get to Lake Township, you'll get to Lake High School. There are, through TMACOG, paths that go to Genoa that had plans to connect to Lemoyne. So there's different variations, and there is a current signed route that goes through Millbury and working its way through that same route. So we're looking at, we met with Northwood because I think their plan and our plan with Oregon Town Center, their plans with their community center to connect the two with a path would be really cool.
Yeah.
They went out and got Safe Routes to School grant funding for Lemoyne, and they're putting it on a wider sidewalk on the west side of Lemoyne from Curtis to Woodville, which is great.
Mhm.
And even their high school has a big wide sidewalk in front, which is great as well. So, I mean, we'd like to go as far as we can go. I think with what we've done from Pickle, we have another grant to build a path from Pickle to Brown. What I'd like to do is to get to Trails End. in
Following that
Northwood.
same right away along the.
So I'd like to get to Trails End in Northwood.
Yeah.
But it's a question of how do you do it? Again, do you get landowners that are willing to sell to give you a path? There's existing easements. Northwood's sewer has a sewer easement that comes due north. And could we ever get a path above those sewer lines? So we're always looking at paths.
Good.
So we think Brown Road, whether you agree or disagree.
Yeah.
I think Brown would be a great location for bike lanes.
Yeah.
Okay. So you could make a loop then. So if we have this path to Oregon Town Center, it comes down, crosses the Brown. Well, heck, if you did bike lanes from that section near 280
Mhm.
all the way to this path that we come from Pickle to Brown, you just created a loop.
We're just looking at, that's all my point was.
On the question on the legality of the sidewalks, and that's an issue that, and I'm totally guilty of that. I know the issue well.
Yeah.
I haven't thought about it much here. I know that's the law, almost default law in Ohio, unless a community step up and do something else. That's something, let's have some conversation with, because I know I don't allow our 8-year-old grandchildren to ride in the street. They're riding on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And they're violating, now, it is legal for children to ride on this, the sidewalk. We'll have to go through the code and we'll dig out,
Sure.
but it's something that we should work through. I'm not allowed to ride on the sidewalk.
No, especially with a bike path. Once a bike path is there,
Sure.
you're kind of going to say, my bike path goes across here.
It's a multi-use path, and the crossing on Navarre is a protected pedestrian crossing, but it's a protected pedestrian crossing. So the question is, do you walk your bike? I don't.
Yeah, I'm just
Okay,
letting you know
that's
that's.
something
the
we
issue.
should look at.
Yes,
But
just
we-
an issue.
and I haven't thought about it.
Last point I have, and this one, and probably involves a lot more people here also now, is the proposed industrial kind of site. As a resident, I guess one of the fears is if we put together a site and once a zoning is changed, what control do we have as residents to what then goes there? Because it's easy to say low bearing, it's going to be a great smog thing. And then you hear things of battery plants and you think of acid, which probably are not even in high-tech batteries nowadays, but you start to go down
Sure.
those fearful trails. But as a citizen, once the city community says, okay, let's zone any piece of property, do we lose our control? And the fear is like once Jeep comes into town, then all the side plants come. So we approve a Jeep plant and then all the side factories start to come later with the smog, with the pollution, with the noise, with the smells that as residents there, no one wants it in their backyard,
Sure.
but then we're forced with it.
So
So that,
fair
if
enough.
that question is kind of can be addressed.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I was gonna say, go ahead, Mr. Beasley. and I'll
I mean,
finish up.
and that is,
Thank you, Rob.
that is really among the key questions the community has to grapple with. And among the tools that we look to try and use instead of just a straight zoning change, use tools like special use is what we use. And it is hard. So let's say we rezoned a parcel, 100-acre parcel to be industrial. It is the Ohio EPA, not the city of Oregon, that polices Title V permits. We have very little say. We have comment authority, but that is a risk for a community, and that you summed it up very well. That's something we have to engage in and say, okay, what are the tools that we use so that we have projects? Among the things that we can choose, though, is that the community says, no, if you want to come here with something that's unattractive, we're not going to give you tax abatement, they'll go someplace else, things like that. but there's risk associated with any of these decisions. And those are fair questions. And we have to look at things like, are there special use things we use to shape the project so that this level of emissions can't be welcome, we get sign off on it. The trade-off on those is the more restrictions we put in, the more likely that your company that says, well, I'll go someplace else. Those are tough trade-offs, but we like putting those kind of restrictions in traditionally so that we can, that is one of the few ways we can shape and build protections. But those are all the legitimate fears. In general, we have to say, how many acres is it that we should or could try and put together? Maybe the answer to the community says, no, we don't want any more. Let's use our 10 acre, 20 acre, 30 acre, 50 acre, maybe an 80 acre parcel, that, and that's it. That's a community decision that's available to us. And those are, or okay, maybe you can put a 150 acre one that, use the land that is blend of residential, or 180 acre, there's that kind of pocket of land that's between, east of Wynn. All right. There's a place there that we looked at as something that's compatible with agricultural uses, but those are questions the community has to ask itself and come up with its own answers on over time. You summed up the fears. There's no, bolt 8 slot 7 answer to that. There's a number of tools we can use, but unless we do it right, there's risk. And that's a fair question. Okay. That's what all the guys. Gary, do you have something?
That is a very good question. And so I would say one of the best practices that's happening today, I don't know if it exists in the Oregon code because I don't know it like I used to, but you don't just designate something M2. So you can't stop anything. You have a zoning designation, either planned unit development or planned industrial development, which again goes back to that site plan review. The community has a whole lot of control down to the color of the brick that you want in the building and the number of trees you want and all those kinds of things. So, I don't think anybody in the economic development world is advocating for communities to wholesale M2 industrial zoning across their community. That is not something we advocate for, and you really should look at the tools that make the best fit for the community, and those are two that are out there in Ohio law today.
Mr. Chair?
Thank you. Mr. Beasley.
Okay, you go ahead.
Mayor. Yeah, Mayor's fair, please.
And we always anticipated for that industrial project to be, like say, our code, ours would be a special use permit, which is very specific. All the specifics in the special use would just permit that. If they sold it, it would go with the property, but it would be the same specific use. Like you said, M2, you sold it, anything M2 is a go.
No
It's a
holds barred.
possibility. So that's why special use in our community would be the tool.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Beasley.
We do have some space available in planned unit development space, but we're looking also at kind of ratcheting up that section of our code. Because one of the things about our code, the difference between M1 and M2, it's almost a little, it's not intentionally disingenuous. That's what it's been for decades. One just says outside processing versus all inside processing. And it defines lighter use. They could be the heaviest use you've got. It's just all done inside. We think that that's why we would depend on either some sort of special use that kind of really can shape the development as we want. And that's a de facto planned unit development or a PUD or those things as you go. But getting it right is still important and something we have to be mindful of, and it's possible to have wrong.
And just to refresh or remind for those that may not know, the special use exemption process also has a public component.
Yeah.
So
Go through council.
There's a hearing, it goes through council, it goes through committee, the plan commission. There is a very public process that goes through. And I would say that in some of the projects that we work with, it's been an effective tool to help control and set standard onto that, as opposed to just giving a carte blanche to, okay, here's the space, go do what you want to do, down to what types of trees we would like to see put in at what areas. So that screening is done and mounding and things of that nature. So thank you all. Next person I have on the list, we'll go ahead and go is Ruth Price. So Ruth, again, I'll ask you to just state your name and your address for the record.
My name is Ruth Price, and I'm at 5255 Seaman Road.
Mhm.
Mr. Gary, I didn't hear your last name. One thing that you mentioned that I took offense to is dying communities. Several of us here, our great-great-grandparents had developed this area. It's never, ever been a dying community. So you have to keep that in mind. It's not a dying community. Okay. Number 2, drainage. Okay, you want to build, you want 400 acres, you want to have 3,000 jobs, parking for 3,000 people. This is known as the Black Swamp. We have a severe drainage problem. We had a bad storm not too long ago, and Bay Shore was flooded, something terrible. My yard next door, it was flooded. There were a lot of other people in the area that had flooding. Drainage is a problem here because of the fact that it was the Black Swamp. My great grandfathers dug part of the ditches by hand. They didn't have equipment back then, but that's how they drained the land so they could make farmland. So it's very personable to some of us that grew up out here, that were born out here. Okay, number 2, I was under the impression several years back that we had a downtown area plan commission. We do not have a downtown plan commission. We have a few stores here, a few stores there. Now you're going to put big apartments in. We already have Piccadilly Apartments. We have an apartment complex on Star Avenue. We have another development on Pickle Road. We have 2 on Route 2. I may have missed some. We do have a lot of, and the one on Pickle Road, Piccadilly, it started out being a halfway decent, and now it's deplorable. Things are not maintained. One of the ones on Route 2, I think I'm not sure the name anymore. Anyway, we're building another one adjacent to it, but the one that's there is not being maintained. So are we going to put another, how many people? 200 and some units? Is that it?
That's correct.
I'm sorry?
208 units.
Okay. How long is it going to be the place? Are there going to be children allowed there? Is this an adult development? Or are we going to have another Piccadilly, or we're going to have another one like down the road? You're talking about industry. I'm talking about residents. We are the community. We live here. We enjoy Pearson Park, Maumee Bay. We do not want more industry. And you're taking it upon yourself that we do. That's all you've talked about is industry. You never talked about one other thing. Oh, I've got all these industry people that want to come into your community. What about Sylvania, Mr. Beasley? Why don't you take some of this industry out to Sylvania or Perrysburg or downtown Toledo? There's spaces in downtown Toledo. The factories have been abandoned. They're a real eyesore. Why don't people go down there? And it's not funny. And
It's a little, it is a
No,
little.
we didn't, it's a
I'm
chair.
so disgusted with the two of you.
Well, if you want,
With what
you just asked a question. You want me to answer or not?
I'm just making a point.
Mr. Beasley, I'd ask,
Okay.
I heard numbers, so I think she has another point. Let's let her finish and then we'll respond as she
The other
finishes.
thing is, we're always talking about this money we're going to lose from BP. What about the property that Oregon owns now? Where are we getting the money for the taxes on that? We're talking about, gosh, we're going to have to cut garbage because if we don't have this development or whatever, where are we getting the money for the taxes? Where are we getting the money for the property we're buying on the corner of Wynn and Seaman? Okay, the green property that you had up there, I talked 2 weeks ago about that 134 acres. Nobody ever said a word that we owned the corner. Don't look so
Well,
confused.
I'm confused. I don't know what you mean.
Cedar Point and Wynn, the little green thing that you had up there, there's an adjacent 20, 46, 80 acres there that could be developed. So you're sitting on that piece
Oh,
of
I think-
property.
Yeah.
We always.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
think
we've
that was
always-
part of the conversation that we
So
had.
we're
that
sitting on that piece of property since 2004.
Sure.
That's when Oregon bought it. I've done my homework.
Well, we,
So,
No,
okay, we're
yes.
just sitting on this. We're paying taxes on it. I know it's not a lot, but it adds up. That's another thing. Electric cars. You're talking about industry. Obviously, none of you ever go down Bay Shore Road by Harbor View. The smell down there is horrible. My husband was raised down there. It's been that way. We've been married 60 years. That smell has been like that since he lived there. So what is going to keep this smell coming from other industries? We had Pure Oil, they closed.
Mhm.
We had Gulf Oil, they closed. We have Sun, we have BP. Huge, big places. And another thing, you talked about the coal plant, that it was closed. My husband worked for Toledo Edison. He worked down there. He said it was one of the cleanest coal plants in the United States because it had been upgraded. They still could not figure out why, because BP was putting out more pollution. Then they still have it running, correct? Because they're burning coke from BP. Okay, these are things. Let me check one more thing. Oh, we're talking about retail stores. Now, Northwood is like this. They have an Applebee's in Northwood. We do not have a decent restaurant on Navarre Avenue. Remember, I think I told you we have 15 fast food stores, restaurants. They have Applebee's, they have Menards, they have Myers.
They don't have Menards.
I know some of them are.
Both of them are in Oregon.
Right,
Both of those are in Oregon.
okay, but not, where is our downtown planning commission? Where is it? They have not done a very good job. We do
Okay.
not have a decent store. We could have put it where Kmart was. This gentleman says they can solicit and bring people in. We have more residents here than what are over by Northwood. I know they're not all in Northwood, but we have more residents here. We would be pulling residents from East Toledo because not everybody wants to drive to Perrysburg or Franklin Park, the ones out that way. These are my concerns. And I hope when you go to sell property, you will remember that we're residents and we've been here a long time. And we don't want more industry, period.
Thank you, Mrs. Price. You know, I do want to address one piece of that, and Mr. Beasley, I know you're waiting as well. The question of why do you have more apartments? So I can't tell you how many times I am stopped, called, emailed about when are we going to get more restaurants? When are we going to get more of this? When are we going to get more of that? Route 20 in Perrysburg was supposed to be Route 2. The leadership in this community at the time decided not to. They challenged the opportunity to do so, which gave us an opportunity, I'll say, in the marketplace where people said, might not want to look at Oregon. We are trying to reverse that trend. Part of the challenge in Oregon is headcount. It's people. People's always the challenge. We can talk about it. You had your opportunity, now we get ours. It's people. That's what they're looking for. It's not how many cars go down Navarre. While that's somewhat important, it's how many people do you have? And when part of your city is in the lake, you can only develop to a certain point. Well, and I think, Mrs. Price, that's what we showed today. The Oregon Town Center planning is what we've done, which has been an evolution and process 5 years, at least, that I've been around for. Community members, business members, we've done stakeholder meetings, we've done public meetings, we've had all kinds of conversations about that project more times
Mr. Hornier.
than I can remember anything else, please. We've gone through that planning process. We've talked to developers, we've talked to designers, we've talked to retailers, we've talked to hotels, we've talked to apartments, we've talked to residential builders, which has all gone into that. Ultimately, we try to design a shape. The market will dictate what comes. We don't get to say, I want a Kohl's in there, call Kohl's and tell them to show up tomorrow. Kohl's has to say, that makes sense to us. But remember, there was an opportunity for this community to have Home Depot with Kohl's right next to it. Route 20 would have been Navarre Avenue. It's not. We're trying to help create those opportunities as well. So the Town Center Commission has been talking for years.
It doesn't have to go to Perrysburg. It doesn't have to go to Sylvania. We moved to Oregon because we like Oregon.
Absolutely agree. I think that's why we all live here.
I think that all of this, and you're talking 99% industrial development. We don't need any more industrial development.
Well, as a community, I think that's a question that is a larger discussion to have, because as much as you say the community doesn't want that, I will tell you there have been people that have been calling me and texting me and emailing me who are interested in it, who do support it. And I agree. We all are entitled to what we feel is right for our communities. Absolutely agree with that. So with that, I did want to pass on to the follow-up question, and I know we've got a few people that
We're
wanted to
good.
chime in.
We're good.
You good? Okay.
Yeah,
Mr.
Roy,
Walton.
I just wanted to make sure that in the Oregon Town Center, it's not all apartments and housing.
Mm-mm.
Everything on the Kmart property and just south of Dustin, where you see those 4 buildings, that's all restaurants, retail, a hotel, office buildings. So it's not all apartments. A large component of that is what you're asking for.
I mentioned where the apartments were.
No, you said the downtown development is all apartments. It's not all apartments. That's what I heard. I apologize. If I heard it wrong, that's what I heard.
I heard what I said was we're putting more apartments in. I didn't say, but I said we have these communities of apartments in Oregon. That's what I said.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Price. Next person I have is Beth Ackerman. I'm sorry, did anybody else have anything? Beth Ackerman.
Thanks for letting us run over your time frame.
Well, we're not over yet.
Well, you said 6. I'm really glad that you spoke about the special use. I wanted to ask, I was gonna leave it for Monday, but since you guys brought it up, and I know I spoke to you, Mr. Beasley, Mr. Safarian, about a young Oregon family, Eric and Andrea Sazelzik, and they live on Brown Road, directly adjacent to the old Lucky Farmers Garden Center. And I just saw an SPSI truck pull out of there today, which the property was sold to A&J, I believe it's Industries, but their parent company is SPSI out of Pennsylvania, and they handle train derailments and the transfer of hazardous materials from, say, like, from off of trains into industrial areas. So this is like, as you guys have said before, this is already been M1 for a long time, right? So when it was Lucky Farmers Garden Center. So here's this young family, they have a toddler and a newborn. And when I had asked Mr. Safarian and Mr. Beasley, when we were talking about the proposed industrial site, what about this young family? What will you do for them? And they just stared at me. And I said, so screw them, right? Sorry, that's the conversation. And they, basically they're collateral damage to the growth and industrial expansion of Oregon. This is a 2-income family with an infant and a toddler directly next to a business that my understanding is will at times house hazardous materials. They are M1. When will that public meeting be? When will this family and the neighboring families find out that they are going to be given 10-day EPA permits to house hazardous materials?
I don't know if everybody, if the zoning already exists as M1, unless there's a request for change of zoning, it's already zoned
Or
M1.
they can handle hazardous materials in an M1?
I can't speak to every particular as far as M1 zoning and what they're allowed to, but if it,
Is that
yeah.
your understanding that because what I read was that you'd have to have a hearing to allow for special permit or special use on that site?
Mr. Beasley.
Mr. Chair, the point that was made is that a special use is a tool we can use when we're doing a zoning change that if you attended our plan commission meetings in council, we routinely try to use a special use so we can put those sorts of conditions in. We can't go back in time to something that was done, I think, even before Oregon was a city.
No, it's an M1 now.
Right, so we can't change it
Does the
now.
zoning allow now for hazardous materials on that site?
I believe that it would.
M1?
I do
No,
not
okay,
know.
'cause
I don't know what
I
material.
looked it up and the zoning code description permits general manufacture, assembly, storage, or transfer activities whose nature or operation produces a minimum of noise, odor, dust, and smoke, also associated with a little outside storage or assembly, low density usage. I read online that I believe they call it Muni code,
Municipal
yeah,
code.
that it would require a hearing to allow for hazardous material on that
Okay.
site. And I've already been told that there will be hazardous material because of the nature of the company that moved in there. When was the public going to be told that had changed or would change, or they just get to slide in
Chair.
and be there?
The
Go ahead,
city,
Mr. Weezer.
to my knowledge, no one in the city has ever been contacted by this company that I made inquiry after maybe you asked. I didn't know who had bought it. It was a private business transaction. We will follow our code to the extent nobody has informed us that they intend to do that yet or they intend to store anything there yet. We have not been aware that they are storing it there yet. But I've never heard the names of these companies until you brought them up here. I don't know.
I'm a dumb farm wife and I know who's moving in down the road.
Well, the fact is those are private business transactions. They are not yet storing anything there that we're aware of.
Okay, Mr. Wallensack, I'm sorry.
No,
Could you
Beth, I was gonna
please-
step
I
up.
asked you a question
Yep.
and you were nice enough to get back
I,
to me
I,
about it.
I reached out and talked to the CEO of their company.
Sure.
They do work with the rail companies on spills. They do cleanups after the spills. The only way that they would be able to store on a 10-day to bring containers back and then ship them out to the facility if they can't arrange for direct disposal at the facilities is they would have to apply for a permit from the EPA. They don't carte blanche get to do it. They have to file with the EPA for authorization to house that. If they don't file, then they're not allowed to bring it back to their site.
So the young family right next door that's just the luck of the draw. You just happen to be
And
right next to
there would be
this.
regulations in place on where they can store them, how they can store them. And they have to keep records of when they would come on their property, when they would go off of their property, where it goes. They have to keep all that records. I don't know if our code requires us to have a hearing of that or not. I don't know that.
Maybe by Monday.
But
Homework.
they would have to apply for a permit from the Ohio EPA to give them authorization to bring that back to their site. If they don't apply for that permit, then they are not required to do
So,
it.
in a nutshell,
Yeah.
it's very upsetting to think that there could be hazardous waste right next to a very young Oregon family. And I know that would bother you guys too, but it's right there in your kill zone of what would be the possible park, industrial zone. I did want to ask, because I read some really good stuff on Jobs Ohio about commitment to doing what's right and acting with integrity, transparency and such, open and communicative with the public about matters related to missions. So when you're out there doing your economic development stuff, that you're out there and open with the community, with citizens, and that, again, I hate to say it, I don't think we'd be having this conversation even yet if I hadn't bothered to tell the neighbors what the city was trying to do. So some days you go, why did I say anything? Anyway, I wanted to say, I'm glad to see Miss Briesler here because you've been very active in my life for the last few months. I wanted to ask you, are you a licensed real estate agent or broker?
No.
Are you, Mr. Beasley?
No,
So, under what authority did you place ours and others' property for sale without a listing agreement?
Mr. Chair.
I was going to say, Mr. Beasley can answer, but I would ask you, we've talked about the fact of what that was put up as. I don't know if that's what you're going to clarify, Mr. Beasley.
The city nor the foundation has placed your land up for sale. The city did, and the foundation did post with the Regional Growth Partnership or Jobs Ohio to say that if we could acquire this, could we develop it? Are people with the developer possibly interested? No one listed your property. No one can sell your property without your permission.
Availability, for sale, yes. Sale price. This is Mr. Meyer's property, his 80 acres, which he had told you to take down. You took down, it got back up there. When I told him, hey, Bill, your property's still up there, he said, hey, wait, I'm upset. It is not for sale. You took it down again. You are listed as the broker. She is listed as the broker for our property, the Rudy's property, the Cusion property. You guys still don't see a problem with this fraud.
Mr. Chair.
You're leaning forward. I don't know if you wanted to address.
Just the point. I never knew that was posted till I was informed here.
How did it get to the Oregon Economic Development Committee Foundation to be posted on their site, which is then posted on Regional Growth Partnership site, who recently has pulled all of Oregon's sites that are their site selector availability. And now I see it's coming back on, and maybe now you're vetting that process to find out if you actually have listing agreements with property owners to put their property up for sale.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
It is a practice in the industry to propose sites for possible development to potential investors. They know that if it can't be acquired, then the project can't go forward. That happens. It is not our intention. No one can sell your property without your consent. We can bring an offer to you, though,
But
and
you
say,
can create a lot of duress when we've expressly told you that we are not for sale.
as soon as you informed us that you were not interested, we moved on.
And Mr. Meyer told you a long time ago that he wasn't interested, and you still yet put it back up there. Do you, is that the practice? Is that a common thing that a person's gonna look at your site selector and make the assumption that it isn't for sale when it says the availability is for sale? Is that how you guys operate? I'm asking, I don't know. 'Cause you guys, well, our
Ms. Ackerman,
all your stuff off So that's. what
Ms.
makes
Sacker,
me
might I
think-
ask you to direct it to council and to the members of the
I'm
committee?
sorry,
We'd be
I'm sorry.
certainly
Well,
glad to try to
When
answer
am I
those
gonna run into
questions.
the regional growth partners?
I understand, but also with the comments that were made to him, Gary's here as our guest that came
Oh,
in
yeah,
on
I'm
our
sorry,
invitation to provide information to us and to the group tonight. I think, as has been talked about on several occasions, the information was looked at as a potential proposed site. I don't think it was intended to be listed as a for sale site.
But it was.
There obviously was some kind of misstep or miscommunication there. I can't speak to the exactly of the hows
And
that it takes place,
I want to thank him
but I
for
do,
removing it from his site when he realized there was no actual legal listing agreement. I appreciate that.
and I think the city tried to take steps to rectify
I
that as
haven't
soon
even
as we
got an
were made
apology. I
aware.
haven't even got a gee, sorry for your bother, Oregonians, for making an assumption on that you would want to, you could be bought.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's pretty upsetting.
I understand, and that was not the intention of the city.
Okay, I'm gonna, we'll go over emissions. I've got all kinds of fun stuff. We can do that on Monday maybe, but
I was going to
do-
say, I would ask to
yeah,
save some
so
for Monday.
I-
I'd ask to stay relevant to the discussion
okay.
today, if we
Well,
could.
When you say that, I this master plan, when was that? When was this one developed, the 2025 master plan?
Oh,
Some of you were
I
probably still
I
here.
don't know. I wasn't here. when
Mr.
it was-
Chair,
Yes,
I
please. Mr.
believe it was
Frislow.
2003 to 5, 2000.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I was just sitting here listening to everybody, and it was crazy because I hadn't seen this, and it was crazy how things come to you. But here from 2003 was a map. Ugh, this thing's 17 pages. I don't know how I missed this. Right on page 78 of the Oregon Master Plan, environmental considerations, you have marked out our woods, Jolin's Woods, and the two properties in the proposed or industrial site as wetlands. And so you knew they were wetlands in 2003. Everyone's acting like we had no idea that that was a wetland.
No, we knew
I mean,
that.
no,
We knew
oh,
that.
you knew
We
it.
knew that.
Okay, well then just, all right, well, good.
We knew it
Okay.
probably was.
It's.
Wait,
Yeah.
I want to stay recognized with Ms.
Okay,
Ackerman at the
well,
mic.
I'm just saying, I was shocked to know that the city was aware of it as far back as 2003. So, I'm not gonna keep eating up everybody's time, but I do think we're gonna have a discussion about the lack of transparency. We have a big gap between, and I appreciate what you did provide for us in the Freedom of Information Act. But from the time he said he was looking with RGP for 500 acres at the Toledo Rotary Club in March of 2020 to the first map that we got of the proposed, Summer put out, March 16th of 2021, there's a void. So just like, I think something's missing. There's every communication, every link, every discussion to what enabled Ms. Vrieselar, Mr. Beasley, and Mr. Lang to go back and forth with these maps to work on Project Maximus. It's all missing. So if you could fill in those blanks for us, that would be great.
And I would say it's probably a question better for a regular council meeting in that
Okay,
discussion.
well, I do want to tell you, I think what you're
Yes,
doing
sir.
up there at Kmart, it'll be great to see something happening up there, and I think that'll make a lot of people happy. I think bike paths are awesome, and a lot of cities use them. I even had suggested to Jan Sheehan at one point that a bike path that picked up at the northeast corner, well, right where Star and Wynn intersect, where the bike path is. I said, wouldn't that be really cool if you could run a bike path from there along the railroad tracks to the like the Sheehan Conservancy or Preserve or
Mhm.
further, yeah. So I'm like, yeah, I'm all about the bike paths. I think they're really cool. And dog parks are cool, but I'll leave you with this. Small dog and a large dog separate.
That's the plan.
That's it.
We do understand that. We've heard that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ackerman. And the last individual I have for this evening, I'm going to try, is Podorowski. Oh, I'm sorry. I do have one other. I'm sorry. Ms. Podorowski, I know you asked to speak last. I do have one other individual. Would you like to let them go prior to you? I'm sorry. Joel Moskowitz. You let her go? You're passing? Okay, thank you. You have one? Yes, please. I ask you to state your name and your address and then your question.
Thanks to the committee. My name's Colin Flanagan. I live at 60 North Coy Road. I'm a recent college graduate, and it seems like there was a missed opportunity here in the town center, and I apologize. I've been gone for the last 3 years at Ohio State.
Yeah, could you bring?
Oh, sure. So I'm a recent college graduate, and I apologize. I've been gone for the last 3 years when most of this was being planned. But it seems like there was a real missed opportunity here where you've got this rig development, the subdivision. It seems like that may have been better spent developing sort of a office park, something like that, to sort of diversify what we have going.
There is a proposed office park that is a component of this. It's not in the residential section per se. It's more towards, I'll say, the southern side of the development. But that is one of the proposed intended uses for some of that. Mr. Beasley, I don't know if I needed
Mr.
you
Chair,
to clarify.
just as a thought, among the challenges or outcomes of COVID is that the developers who are looking at office space are all taking a step back right now as
Everybody's working from
offices
home.
are reducing the size of their footprints and allowing workforce to work from home. No one knows whether that is a temporary phenomena or a midterm phenomena or a long-term phenomena. I know, data is not the plural of anecdote, but in my immediate family, my son-in-law's business is eliminating office space in 2 cities and people are working from home. My son says he doesn't think he'll ever work in an office again. I've got 2 family members who are just moving here who are going to be working from home because their offices are in other cities, but they're going to come around here. So I'm glad to have them. So developers right now are really moving soft on new office space development, except on the medical office side. That's just a reality. We had a section of this always set aside. If you look at around the town green, we tried to envision office above retail and some townhouses and those spaces. Right now, the office developers are very soft on putting shovels in the ground on that, just because people are trying to, same way the restaurants are a little slower right now. It's just everyone's trying to figure out what's happening post-COVID and their timeline. We have restaurants very interested in coming here, and we're in their committees and discussing right now. But the office is a little softer in this environment, and people are going to be taking, I think, a couple of years. Same way hotels are taking a year off in a lot of spaces, trying to wait and see, where the market's going to go, where business travel is going again. Are they going to go away from Zoom meetings and have in-person meetings? Those are going on.
Right, and I've read the same memos from Deloitte and McKinsey that you have. But it seems that jumping the gun on another suburb where we have the opportunity to bring in young people like myself, I witnessed people. I gave a presentation in an economics class 2 months ago, and I said, raise your hand if you plan to live in the place that you grew up in. And 25% of people raised their hand. That seems like an opportunity to me where maybe we shouldn't have jumped the gun on something.
Sure. Well, Mr. Chair,
I was going to say, I'll take the first opportunity if I can, Mr. Beasley, then I'll pass to you. That's part of the reason for the development. So that's why there's an integrated complex. So our entire concept through this entire evolution, if you will, over the last several years was kind of that mixed use. So you mix in residential with some of the commercial, some office able that's in there, whether it's, I'll say, multifamily type of housing that was available, because we want to create walking customer base as well as a driving customer base. We have opportunity with bicycling customer base. So that's the idea of that integration to that. So while there is residential home ownership sites, there is also apartment space integrated into this to help create that type of atmosphere. Because as we did our meetings with, as we call it, stakeholders, community members, business owners, that's what many of them told us that they want, that their I'll say, best and brightest targets for employees are looking for these types of things. And that's why that is integrated into this plan. So there is residential mixed use, Mr. Beasley.
And Mr. Chair, on the office space side, the city's not going to build any of these things.
someone has to put up their money or borrow money and build it themselves. Right now, the office builders are kind of taking a step back. They're trying to say, what's going to happen? It is our hope that they will then take a year, see what happens, and then they'll step into the market. We will have places for them to go when they're ready to come. So that's important. We agree with you. You have me at hello, all right, in terms of that opportunity. And we want to make sure we shape this in a way that then there's opportunity to come and there's opportunity to be above retail with some office space. Right now, the people who put up their money to build things are soft on that component of it. We'll have space there for them if that time shifts. And it's our hope and really the expectation that some of these outcomes from COVID are temporary. That everyone says, well, I'll never be in an office again. In 2 years, maybe I'll be in an office again. So those are things we'll see.
Mr. Wallenczak.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. And also, though we have this map up that looks like this now, it's not set in stone that the components north of the residential and the apartments, that there's nothing set in stone that that's the exact layout and that's exactly what's going to be there. It's been a fluid target since we started this 4 or 5 years ago, and it'll continue to evolve until they put a shovel in the ground. So yeah, that's the current thought of what's going to happen. The layout may be different. The use may be a little bit different, but that's just the concept. So next year, you know, that middle section with the green, that's probably going to be the last part of this developed. By the time that that's developed, office use may be back in play into that section. Again, this was put together as a concept of what's going in there, not set in stone. This is exactly what it's going to look like. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Podorowski.
Hi, my name is Mary Ellen Podorowski. I live at 6325 Brown Road. I was the former Associate Director for River East and Economic Revitalization Corporation. I have done economic development for over 18 and a half years. Prior to that, I worked with Owens Corning for 21 years, and I did major projects. Number one was the Alyeska pipeline. So I'm talking about different kind of developments. We put in Parker Steel on Star Avenue. The place was vacant. We put in the docks on the Maumee River, building condos, and I've expanded. But one thing I did, I taught business plans. And we had programs through the city of Toledo for startup companies. Do we have anything like that in Oregon? Also, you could get a $20,000 startup loan. And we would have from the CDCs, each one represent, then we had a rep from each bank sit there, take the business plan to the committee, and the banks would take turns honoring that. The first 1/3 came back to the city because that was our revolving loan. I started over 25 businesses. And I did one nurse that came in. She started a good 2 businesses at 20 grand. You know, when she retired, you know what she sold that for? 7 figures. That's quite an investment. But see, also you don't have anything here, so how are you going to get businesses to start up here? Small ones, and then grow. Then we had a program where you needed 50 grand to grow. We did that. Also, I got it in with Gil Gilbert, who's the head of the SBA, because you know, if you get a loan through the SBA through a good business plan, once you keep paying it, they keep increasing your credit because it's a win-win deal for everybody. So I'm just worried about, what are you doing for small business people? What are you doing for medium-sized that want to grow? What are you doing to help those people? You can do economic development thinking about the big projects, but it's the smaller ones that start up and then grow into bigger things. We've had so many. And we also had, for small people that want to start a business, but they're by themselves. We had 3 buildings. Old buildings, we had, one was a business incubator. I know I went out to UT and talked to the kids out there. We had a lot of them come in. You give cheap rent, but we had one secretary that sat in the middle with the phone numbers for each office. So that when they got a call, she would answer for them because they always thought they had somebody working for them. So you can do so many things to help people start a business. Why aren't we doing it here? Because you got a lot of vacant places. You need to get them in. I'm just bringing up some experience that I've had, but my biggest one is, and I'm very proud of this because this is my 28th year serving on TMACOG. The last 21 years, I'm on Transportation Council. I was the original part that put the 2025 plan together for our community area. So I've done a lot of projects, I-280 bridge, task force, design committee, you name it. So I've been with everything and I got the experience. So I'm willing to help. If you guys need some help on how to set this up, I'd be more than happy to. It gives me something to do because when I retired, I grew up in Birmingham. And when my brother passed, we moved into his house on Brown Road. And I'm glad we got out of the neighborhood because none of these neighborhoods in Toledo are the same anymore. They just aren't. They're just going down.
Yeah.
I keep telling them because all you see is LLCs buying up houses all over. And then they rent to anybody and they get destroyed. I keep telling them you should have a $25 rental agreement with every housing property. And that goes into the inspection department because they don't have enough inspectors. You know, they're trying to enforce the fire code and all that, the lead paint. Well, you got to do something.
Yeah.
But anyways, I just want to give my 2 cents and enjoy everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Perotti. And good points made. Back in the day, and I believe it was Don Monroe who was very active in that. We had looked at the business incubator at a time when I was starting a business and had looked at that. So it's certainly something that fosters a little conversation internally of what we can do to support that. So appreciate everybody's comments with that. So, and I'll ask for the other committee members, Mr. Zale, anything to add or questions as we wrap up? Oh, Mr. Dabish, any other council members? Kathy, Dennis, Mayor?
Good to go.
Nope. Anybody else? All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Seaman.
I would just like to thank everybody for coming out.
Absolutely.
Thursday afternoon when the weather's so nice. So thank you for being here. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Seaman. From that, I'll seek a motion to adjourn from one of the committee members.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Dabish. Second, any objection? Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, okay, so, oh,
Those are all virtual. I'm in town on Monday.
Wow, he'd be just across the street from it.
Tuesday, I'm in town.
Oh, well.
Like
Hasn't it always
later day Wednesday, I'm
Yeah, yeah,
gone.
but now
So
the business, what, now?
Monday,
what-
Wednesday, probably up
Yeah,
about
yeah, that,
midday.
yeah,
Look
yeah.
pretty good.
That's right.
I mean, I got a few things, but
Oh,
my
yeah,
God.
that's not far away.
Thursday and Friday are
Yeah.
tough.
1980s?
Yeah.
You've got your calendar. Do you want to lock? No A in the last name.
children,
Put it in for
and they
11.
purchased a house, their forever home here in Oregon. And I want to
It
see
should be good.
Oregon succeed. I don't
Yeah, like I
want to
said,
see
I'm pretty good in
Oregon
there. If
fail.
anything comes
I
up
wanna
from you
see
that kind of
Oregon
prevents that from
thrive.
working, just give me a holler. Otherwise, I'll expect you to call me.
Because I want
tomorrow, and then I'll look
industry.
forward to talking to you. All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Oh,
Have
I
a great
know,
night.
but I also see a lot of the environmental issues. Yeah, I want to talk to you before you leave. No,
I'll be right.
where are you going?
Right, just right here for me.
Oh.
Nice job, Mr. Boniek.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it, Gary. I appreciate you being in
Hey,
here and being a part of
anytime.
it.